What's going on, guys? Welcome back, and in today's video we are going to be going over every possible Gamer Edition figure that we are yet to see in Transformers Studio Series. Now, I have already covered all of the possible releases for the standard line, with the link to that video being in the description below, and I will eventually be covering the 86 line in its own video as well. But back to today's video now, and the way this is going to work is that I will be going through all of the various Transformers games, listing off each individual character from those games, and then giving you my thoughts as to the likelihood of those characters actually being released. I am going to be ignoring all of the G1 based games though, as those characters already have the 86 line, and so it just wouldn't make sense for them to also be released in the Gamer Edition as well. But with that out of the way, let's now get straight into this list, with our first game being 1997's Transformers Beast Wars, which was released on the original PlayStation. Now, of course, this basically just includes most of the main Beast Wars cast, and so we have Optimus Primal, Cheetor, Rat Trap, Dinobot, Rhinox, Airazor, Maximal Drones, Megatron, Scorponok, Tarantulas, Black Arachnia, Inferno, Pterosaur, Predacon drones, and the Scrix units. And I think it goes without saying that we are very unlikely to receive any of these guys in the Gamer Edition line, as these characters didn't originate from the games, and so they would make way more sense to be released in either a separate line from the Studio Series or under their own subline inside the Studio Series. But moving on now to the sequel for this game, and that is Beast Wars Transmetals, which was released in 1999, also on the original PlayStation. And I should quickly mention here that I'm not going to be listing off any characters that have either already received a figure for that design or have already had their design be covered in a previous list. And so, for example, with Beast Wars Transmetals, I'm not going to be listing off any characters that appeared in the first game. And so for this game's characters, we have Silverbolt, Tigertron, Windrazor, Rampage, Quickstrike, Ravage, and Waspinator. And again, it doesn't make any sense for any of these guys to be released in the Gamer Edition line, and so let's just move straight on to the next game, and this is Transformers for the PlayStation 2, which was released in 2004 and was based on the Transformers Armada series. Now, this game did have around 40 individual minicons, however, I'm not going to be naming each and every one of them, as I'd be here all day, and I also don't think they would be released separately anyways. As for the actual characters from this game, we have Optimus Prime, Hotshot, Red Alert, Megatron, Starscream, Cyclonus, Tidal Wave, Heavy Unit, the various different kinds of Decepticons, and finally Unicron. Now, the only characters that I could maybe see us getting here would be the various Decepticons, purely because they did actually originate from this game. However, since the others aren't likely to be released, I wouldn't hold out hope for the Decepticons either. But moving on to the live action adaptations now, and this is where we're actually going to start seeing some figures popping up that are highly likely to be released under the Gamer Edition title. And so the first game here is Transformers the Game, which was released alongside the live action movie in 2007, with it having several different versions depending on what system that you were playing this game on. And so the characters from the console versions of this game are Shockwave, Dropkick, Payload, Scrapper, Swindle, Overcast, Dreadwing, Mixmaster, Salvage, Longarm, and the Energon drones. I strongly believe that, discarding the Energon drones, we will receive each of these figures at some point down the line, as Hasbro are bound to move on to the movie adaptations once they cover most of the War for Cybertron characters. Now, for the PSP version, we have Thundercracker, Hound, Trailbreaker, Sideswipe, Wheeljack, and Hoist. I think these guys are less likely to be released since their designs are quite basic. However, at the same time, I do still think it's possible. And finally, for the DS version of this game, we have just one character here, and that is Creatorbot. This is the character that you actually play as in these games, with it being able to take on multiple different forms and designs based on what vehicle mode it scans. And so based on this, I don't think we will see a Creator-Bot figure in the Gamer Edition line, unless they decide to make a separate figure for each of its different designs. But on to Revenge of the Fallen now, and this game was released in 2009 on all the available platforms. The characters that appear in all versions of this game include Breakaway, Dead End, Payload, the Protectobots, the Aerial Bots, the Omnibots, the Combaticons, the Constructicons, the Seekers, and finally the Stunticons. Now, most of these are just the various nameless drones that you fight in each level, and so I could maybe see Hasbro giving us a single figure from each subclass. However, the main attraction here is definitely Breakaway. This is a figure that I think pretty much everyone instantly thought of when they first announced the Gamer Edition line, and I'm almost certain that Hasbro knows this as well, and so I definitely expect to see this figure being one of the first live action Gamer Edition figures to be released. And our last character to mention here is the protoform that you play as in the DS versions of the game. And just like Creator-Bot, this figure is also highly unlikely to be released due to the many different forms that it can take in those games. Now on to Dark of the Moon, with this game being released in 2011 on all the platforms except the PC. And so for the console version, we have Warpath, Stratosphere, Air Raid, Silverbolt, Soundwave, and the Combaticon drones. I can definitely see us getting most, if not all, of these characters in figure form, and especially so for the named characters like Warpath and Air Raid, since they have very distinct and cool looking designs which would fit perfectly amongst the rest of the Bayverse cast. As for the Wii, 3DS and regular DS versions of this game, we have just one character yet again. However, this time it's not actually the playable character and is instead Lockdown. This design is very much inspired by his Transformers animated design, and personally I think it has a medium to low chance of being released in the Gamer Edition line. So, we do technically have one more movie adaptation to cover. However, since it also acts as a sequel to two other games, I think it's best that we cover those games before we get to this one. And so the first of these games is Transformers War for Cybertron, which was released on all platforms in 2010. This game and its sequel has a ton of characters, and it does currently seem to be the main priority for Hasbro when it comes to the Gamer Edition, as we have already seen quite a few characters from this game in particular be released in Studio Series. As for the characters that we are yet to see from the console and PC versions of this game, we have Jetfire, Silverbolt, RC, Air Raid, Warpath, Jazz, Scattershot, Zeta Prime, Soundwave, Breakdown, Brawl, Slipstream, Shockwave, Demolisher, Onslaught, Dead End, Omega Supreme, Triptychon, Rumble, Frenzy, Laserbeak, and all the various soldiers and drones from both factions. Now obviously we are currently receiving characters from this game already, and so I think it's pretty much certain that we will eventually get the rest of these characters in figure form, with the only characters that I'm a tiny bit uncertain about being Omega Supreme and Triptychon, simply because both of these characters are absolutely massive in size. Now for the characters from the DS version, we have Ultra Magnus, Hotshot, Grimlock, Swoop, Dirge, Ramjet, Cyclonus, Motormaster, Dragstrip, Cup, and again the various remaining unnamed soldiers. I think these characters have a fair chance of being released since they are quite notable names and do go on to make appearances in the sequel anyways, with this sequel being called Transformers Fall of Cybertron. This game was released on both consoles and PCs in 2012, with it later being re-released on Xbox One and PS4 in 2016. Now, most of the characters from War for Cybertron do make a return in this game, so by excluding them, the remaining characters that we have from this game are Perceptor, Slug, Snarl, Sludge, Metroplex, Bruticus, Swindle, Vortex, Blastoff, Quake, Sharpshot, Kickback, Hardshell, and again we have a bunch of different soldiers and drones to finish up the list. And again, we will most likely be getting each of these characters at some point down the line, with Metroplex being the only uncertainty again due to how big of a character he is. However, with both War for Cybertron games now covered, we can now move on to the final movie adaptation and also the final game in the War for Cybertron trilogy, and this game is called Transformers Rise of the Dark Spark, and this game was released on most platforms in 2014. This game basically adds no new named characters at all to the roster, with it purely consisting of either movie characters or returning characters from the War for Cybertron games. This leaves us with all the various unnamed enemies that you fight throughout the game, and so I'll just display them all on screen now and then move on to the next game. And our next game is Transformers Earthspark, which was also released on all platforms in 2023. The characters from this game are Bumblebee, Optimus Prime, Grimlock, Skullcruncher, Novastorm, Skywarp, Twitch, Thrash, Hashtag, Jawbreaker, and Nightshade. This is a similar situation to the Beast Wars game, where these characters are way more likely to be released separately to the Gamer Edition line, simply because they did not originate from the game itself. Onto some games that are exclusive to the DS now, and first up here is Transformers Animated, releasing in the year 2008. And the characters we have here are Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Bulkhead, Prowl, Ratchet, Ultra Magnus, Megatron, Lockdown, Shockwave, Lugnut, and Blitzwing. This is basically just the cast of the show, and some of them have actually already been released in separate lines to the studio series, and so I think that's pretty much a confirmation that they will definitely not be released under the Gamer Edition subline. Next up, and in a similar situation to Transformers Animated, we have Transformers Prime, which was released in 2012. And so to quickly go over the characters from this game, we have Optimus Prime, RC, Bulkhead, Ratchet, Bumblebee, Megatron, Starscream, Knockout, Soundwave, Dreadwing, Thunderwing, Arachnid, the Vacons, and finally the Insecticons. And basically, like Transformers Animated, we have actually seen some of these characters get figures in other lines, and so again, that's pretty much confirmation that they will not be released as Gamer Edition figures. But that about wraps up all the possible Gamer Edition figures yet to be released, and as you guys can see, this is definitely a much smaller pool of characters to choose from, with most of them being characters that are very unlikely to be released in the first place, especially as Gamer Edition figures. The only saving grace to this, however, is something that I didn't actually know until after editing this video, and that is the recent reveal of a Transformers Devastation Optimus Prime figure, which sets the precedent for Hasbro to actually release characters from a game despite them either having an existing figure or making sense in another line. And so with that in mind, the Gamer Edition line definitely has a ton of potential to be great, and I'm super excited to add so many of these characters to my collection when they eventually get made. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe if you did. However, other than that guys, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.